Yo, Bob, what's up, dude?
Yo, man, March Madness is coming up.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. You have any plans?
I mean, you know me. I love to make a bracket.
All right, you want to put a little something on it?
Ooh, you're feeling confident.
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe putting together a little machine learning model that I think could beat pretty much anything that you put together.
So your model versus my brain.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's say 50.
50, huh? All right, deal, you're on. With 50 papayas on the line, I knew I had to take this wager seriously. Okay, so I haven't done any real sports analytics content recently, so I thought it would be fun to do something seasonal with March Madness. In this video, I'll take you into the process of building a model to generate win probability for a tournament like this, and as the tournament plays out, you can follow along to see how this model does. How my model does in comparison to my friend Bobby's, in comparison to the average of everyone building these brackets. And of course, you can check in and see how it does in the Kaggle competition. If you aren't familiar, the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournaments are a pretty big deal in the US. The high level of competition and the excitement about the games has earned the tournament the name March Madness. For this video, we're focusing on the men's tournament. Essentially, 64 Division I teams make the NCAA tournament. Teams can either win their conference or be voted in, and I guess there's also technically play-in games. After that, each team is seeded based on perceived skill. As far as the tournament goes, it's a single elimination bracket. That means teams play each other, the losing team goes home, and the winning team advances until there is a single team standing. Last year, the tournament didn't happen, so that makes my alma mater, the University of Virginia, the reigning champ for the last 2 years. Hopefully, that won't bias my analysis too much. That can't be right. Time to rebuild the whole model. As you might imagine, I wanted to data science this thing. And in order to kick things off, my friends Andy and Jeff, who you might recognize from my podcast, decided to do a full day hack with me. On the first day, we wanted to try to do 3 things. The first was to define the problem, the second was to understand the data, and the third was to get a working model. Things went suspiciously smoothly on the first day. We started with a very simple Monte Carlo simulation model. Essentially, you just create distributions of all the team's points scored and the points that were scored against them, and you randomly sample this over and over again to see who would win matchup games. More specifically, for each team, you take a random sample of the points you would expect that team to score, average with the points that you would expect the opposing team to give up. Then you compare the results to see which team wins. If you do this enough time, you can get the win probability for each team as a distribution. This is the little tool I built to actually go ahead and simulate these things. It's available on Kaggle and on Streamlit. Simulation like this is a simple baseline model to work off of. It also usually produces good results for how little data there is. Well, unfortunately, this time our model didn't do very well. It actually kind of sucked. Whenever we're creating a model, we want to have a baseline. The most straightforward baseline for this analysis would be to pick the top seeded team every single time. If we did that, then we'd expect to pick the winner about 68% of the time. In our simple simulation approach, we were getting the correct winner about 60% of the time. That suggests to me that a lot of work needs to be done. I should note the most important thing isn't always picking the winner. For the Kaggle competition portion of this, they're evaluating things based on log loss, so not exactly win prediction accuracy. The idea here is that we submit our confidence that a team will win, basically our expected win probability. We get penalized more if we're confident that a team will win and they end up losing and vice versa. Honestly, I never expected it to be easy though. That's part of the fun, right? Generally, the most successful models for predicting outcomes pull from the wisdom of the crowds, either using an aggregate of multiple models or a simple layering system on top of other models usually proves to be very effective. I'm sure someone could probably build a really good model in a day, but that someone is not me. So we decided to schedule another session. And our next session wasn't quite as productive. We basically just ate Chinese food and thought up other model ideas. The good thing that came out of it was that we decided to combine a few different models with our simulation approach. So we essentially were going to build a couple classifiers, a random forest, and a simple neural net. We also were going to build an ELO rating model, which you know I've been obsessed with, and a model solely based on the tournament seeds. Admittedly, I was running a little short on time at this point, so this is one factor that went into our model selection process as well. So for the random forest and neural nets, I took the basic data that we were given and I created some rolling averages. Honestly, the feature engineering was by far the hardest part of doing this analysis. I essentially made 200 or so features based on the different historic rolling averages and timeframes. Hopefully I'll have this Kaggle workbook up eventually. It's like really messy and pretty gross, so it'll probably take a lot of overhead for me. I ran the random forest and the neural net on the same dataset as I'd mentioned before. I chose these models specifically because I didn't have to worry as much about multi-collinearity issues as with some other model approaches. This data ended up being significantly larger than I thought, so I tried using CUML for the random forest. I hadn't worked much with NVIDIA's Rapids before, and I have to admit I really liked it. Special thanks to Z/HP for the hardware and NVIDIA for this useful module. Honestly, it sped up my parameter tuning by at least 20 times. These two models ended up doing significantly better than the simulation. We're looking at around a 68% accuracy and a 70% accuracy from the random forest and the neural network, respectively. Next, I turn my focus to the ELO rating. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably know I'm absolutely obsessed with these. Essentially, ELO is stolen from chess and allows us to do some simple math to get the same predicted probability output as our other models. I totally just jacked the ELO ratings for March Madness from warrennolan.com. Definitely check that out. I've linked it in the description. This is how the ELO rankings are created. Essentially, all teams start with the same number of ELO ranking points, usually 1,500. As they play more games, they earn points for beating other teams, and they lose points for losing games. They get more points for beating opponents with higher ratings, and they lose more points for losing to lower ranked teams. You use this formula that compares the two ELO ratings, and it spits out the probability that the first team will win. And finally, the last part of our model Jeff came up with was a simple logistic regression that takes the seed differential of the teams and makes a prediction solely on that. Honestly, if that's already performing at 68%, probably won't hurt our model too much. As I mentioned before, I was pressed for time, which again was my own fault, but because of that, I only average these models. If I wasn't in a time crunch, I generally recommend using stacking. That means we feed the outputs of each of these models into another, essentially regression model, and it tells us how much to weight them. You can check out all of the different predictions that my models make on the Streamlit app that's linked in the description and in the first comment. After submitting my answers to the Kaggle competition, I wanted to also make a bracket based on these predictions, so I could compete with my friend Bobby. As I did this, I kind of lost a lot of confidence in the random forest and neural net models, especially when it predicted UVA losing in the second round. Still, this is a good learning experience for myself. I needed to do a way better job of testing the model on past tournament results, but we can really only do as good as we can in the time frame that we have. And now, all we can do is wait. I want to know from you guys, how do you think I'll do? Will I lose all of my papayas, or will I become the papaya king of March Madness?